Welcome down to my 9-foot homemade oak bar. Pour yourself a cold one. You are listening to Bucs in the Basement. My name's Chris, and Craig here is the biggest Pirates fan you'll ever meet. Let's talk Pirates baseball now. Welcome to Bucs in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no one lies. We'll never know.
My friend, you got to help me through this show as we sit here at the 9-foot homemade oak bar in my basement because I had to record a brewery segment today for one of the other podcasts on the network, and I'm kind of going already.
You're kind of going? You're like going, or
going.
like, you know?
Oh, no, I'm going. The guy made 2 milkshake IPAs for the summer. Those are thick, and they're high in alcohol. And then he unveiled a bourbon barrel-aged stout that was in 1 barrel, I want to say Woodford Reserve, for 3 years, and then put in some sort of maple bourbon barrel for a 4th. It was aged for 4 years in bourbon barrels. Like, I feel like I'm going to fall off the stool right now. Like, I did midday drinking. I figured I was going to try one thing, right? They were celebrating, like, National Brewers Week on the show, and I was going to do one drink. And instead, he brings out 3 full 16-ounce drinks in front of me for the show and sits there and does the interview as we're pounding them on the YouTube
I mean,
video.
You can't turn those down, and yeah. I'm glad you didn't, you know. No, you can't. I mean, that's the problem. There's so many shows on the Broadcast Basement On Demand Radio Network, and they span across the country, and we're lucky to be able to do what we do, and I'm lucky that I can sit in my basement and do this. But, it's the middle of the week, and I'm just kind of trying to hide from the family that Dad's already snockered. And he's just trying to get through the day. The good news is that the Pirates, even for the fact they're 2 out of their last 10 that they've won, which is not a good thing, are still a winning record, still have a lot of positive thoughts. I think that Pirates fans that are upset about the fact that they're not just going to go wire to wire this year, kind of lost perspective. This is a positive start to your season. And the only thing I'm really concerned about is, will you be able to handle adversity and bounce back, have a positive season, and end up, if they end up 500 or a game over or better, it is a great 2023 because you are just coming out of your rebuild and your window hasn't opened yet. That's all you can hope for, right? Well, for some Pirates fans, I mean, they're hoping that we could take advantage of a weak division and actually take it, which I'm not saying that, winning the division is a bad thing. That's where I'll come off. I mean, people will probably be like, oh.
No, you want to win. You want to win. I don't care about draft selection anymore. I don't care about that. I don't care. If you can win, you can win. If you have a puncher's chance, go. But you know what? You don't make trades at the trade deadline that hurt your team. You don't give away anything right now. You could give away Rich Hill. You could sit there and say, we're going to sell Rich Hill, but we're going to be buyers in another thing. And you could pick up a player that maybe is at the end of a contract that you think you can sign to an extension, or maybe has the end of this year and 1 more year. And you're like, if we can get him into the organization and start winning, maybe we can sign him because they should have plenty of capital. I know Bob Nutting's cheap, but if he looks at Ben Cherington and says, this is how much you can expand the payroll, you can be a buyer and a seller and still be going out and trying to win more games than you lose. That's the fascinating thing of coming out of a couple of years of a rebuild. You can do a bunch of things. But the one thing you don't want to do is give away prospects and throw anything away to try to win a World Series this year, because I don't think that that's realistic, okay? What you have to do is make smart moves that continue to build your team. You don't need to sacrifice so anymore. You're not trying to lose 100 games and have a high draft pick. That's over.
Yeah, and you look at a team like that we just played in the Baltimore Orioles where,
last year, they sold off, and I think we had Rob Biertempfel on to talk about this. They sold off Trey Mancini. They sold off their, closer, and basically their owner had to go. I think it was their GM had to go and just basically say, hey, guys, and sell them on the idea that, you're having a great season. We're still continuing to push forward, but maybe we're just not there yet, because there is a big difference between winning a weak division, which, they didn't have a weak division, but the Pirates do, and actually being a team that is competitive enough to win a World Series, because that's the ultimate goal. I feel like as Pirates fans, we kind of lose track of that sometimes, just because even in those 3 years when we were good, there was always a team, and it was usually the St. Louis Cardinals, who were better than us. So our thing was, we need to win a division so we don't have to go into that wild card game. Well, that wild card game doesn't exist anymore. It's a 3-game series at this point in time. So I think that it's just like, okay, if we can just win the division, then we've maybe kind of beat away some demons from the past, that it's just going to all of a sudden, turn around and be great. Yes, you want to win, but you also have to realize, where you're at in this rebuild. You are a 100-loss team 2 years running, 3 years if it wasn't for the pandemic. To think that, you're going to turn around and win the World Series, this isn't, Rookie of the Year. This isn't Angels in the outfield. You're still going to have your bumps along the way. Hopefully it can turn around a little bit where we're actually scoring more runs and not going on streaks that we're going, on right now. We did lose 2 or 3 to the Rockies. That was fairly disappointing. Like we talked about last week, getting swept by the Rays and the Jays was disappointing, but it was almost like that we expected kind of to lose those series going into it. Not that you wanted to lose them. Now, this is where you get Detroit, and you need to go in there for 2 games and just kind of say,
you got to beat
them up. Even though Detroit's been playing fairly well, I think they've kind of been playing over their skis, kind of like the Pirates were during April.
Yeah, but I think the Pirates are a better team. Who was it? Was it Eckersley? Was that the one that sat there and said there's no Major League Baseball players?
Yeah, the
on this
hodgepodge
team?
of nothingness, yeah.
Right, a hodgepodge of nothingness. All right, well, let me tell you this. You got Rodolfo Castro, of all people, who's got a 113 OPS plus, so he's well above average because that's 100. He's a Major League Baseball player. Brian Reynolds is a Major League Baseball player, signed and locked up at a 127 OPS plus, an 835 OPS. He's hitting 293 with 500 slugging. You got Jack Sawinski, who, even though he's hitting 235, with the 855 OPS and the 365 on-base percentage, an OPS plus of 134. Connor Joe, who you acquired, because you identified talent, and I know he's 30 years old, 261 with an 886 OPS, with a 141 OPS plus. Andrew McCutchen, I don't know how long he lasts on his team. He's 35. He's like the light bulb that's just getting bright at the end, but it's a nice little addition. And you've got O'Neal Cruz when he gets healthy next year. And you've got Jason DeLay, who's going to be a good backup catcher. I think that's what he's showing you. You need 2. Every team needs 2. I think you should be getting more at-bats than Hedges, but you know what? No matter what, whoever comes up, if it's Endy coming up here, at some point I think DeLay's the backup. That's what it should be. And even Marcano, he's got a 107 OPS plus. You got plenty of major leaguers on this team. This is what you were waiting for. This is why you suffered for the last couple of months. The biggest problem that you have is you got to find pitching. That's the biggest issue. You look at this rotation, you look at it for the future, you're going to have to spend money to put a rotation together and hope that some of these guys who are still sitting down in the minors are ready next year. And that's what the whole season's about at this point. I'm curious who's coming up. I'm curious who performs down in the minor leagues that we can sit there and pencil in to one of the rotation spots next year. You can go out and try to win as many games you want to this year and go for it. Have fun at the ballpark this summer. And if they make it to the postseason, get delirious. You never pass up an opportunity when you get out hot, because there are teams that expected to be postseason teams right now that have under 500 records, that are 10 games out of first place or 8 games out of first place, and are miserable right now. And they did everything they thought right in the offseason, and they didn't do it. So enjoy it. Go for it. I'm just saying, don't screw up the long-term window you should have for this team because you're trying to win it all in a year that's kind of a surprise.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing to have, and you, like you said, you don't want to waste it. I think the biggest thing is that people are just like trying to inject stuff from the minor leagues to catch that, like almost like lightning in a bottle. In, like you said, like a Henry Davis. Henry Davis has like a 1100 OPS. Like he's like hitting the crap out of the ball down in Double A. They've started to play him some in right field, and I honestly think, and I think I read something in The Athletic today, and it wasn't from Rob Biertempfel, but he shared it, where it's just like, well, he's getting some looks in right field because they're realizing if he comes up, like there's not going to be enough space for him to catch, DH, and get enough at bats. So to get him some more, looks in the field, because I believe he only has like a couple starts last year and only like I think 3 starts this year in right field. We don't want to see it.
Is he a bad catcher? I mean, I hate to cut you off, but I'm just curious. I mean, you follow the minor leagues. Is he a bad catcher? Is that what the problem is? He's bad defensively. He can't call a game?
I mean, that's kind of what they've been saying, and a lot of scouts have been saying as well, is that, his framing isn't great, his blocking isn't great, the calling of the game is a little bit behind. They're saying that if you're waiting for the catching to come around, it's probably going to be about another year before he comes up. So instead of, June or July of this year, it would be June or July of next year. But the bat is about as legitimate and about as ready as it's going to get.
Can I give you a couple of catchers that were drafted as high-end catchers that ended up not playing catcher? Because I know Pirates fans are worried about this.
Yeah, this is like a thing that's on there. I mean,
they're very upset about this. Like, oh my goodness, we drafted his catcher. We drafted him so high. And now we're a failure because he's not going to be the catcher. Don't worry about it. Endy Rodriguez is going to be a catcher. He'll be one of your catchers. I believe that. But if he turns into Dale Murphy, remember Dale Murphy?
I do remember Dale Murphy.
For the Braves? 1,800 career major league games as an outfielder. He was drafted as a high-end catcher. Joey Votto was a catcher. He was a high-end catcher prospect who's won an MVP, never playing catcher. Raul Ibanez. Craig Biggio was a catcher, Craig. He was drafted as a catcher. But if you can find Craig Biggio, does it matter where you put him? Carlos Delgado was a catcher. Carlos Delgado was a catcher. You want me to go way back? We'll go with the Philadelphia Athletics. Jimmy Fox was a catcher. And here's the name I want you to remember. Okay, because if Henry Davis turns into anything like this guy, are you really going to be concerned as to whether or not he's getting those hits in the outfield instead of behind the plate? Bryce Harper was a catcher. Remember that?
I think a lot of people forget
Bryce
that.
Harper, high. I mean, he was right up at the top of the draft. I can't remember exactly his spot. This guy was picked by the Washington Nationals as a catcher. And he goes out and becomes a right fielder. And he signed for a ridiculous amount of money when he went in the free agency. If you get Bryce Harper, do you care if he's behind the plate? You draft, here's the thing. I always try to tell people this. You try to draft as many shortstops, catchers, and center fielders as you can. Because they can always be converted to another position. Center fielders can go into the corner. Shortstops can pretty much play any position except for catcher. And catchers can move out into the outfield or first base. I don't understand why anybody drafts a second baseman. I've never gotten that. Maybe a third baseman, okay, fine. Some guys need to have a gun over a third. But why would you ever draft a first baseman? Why would you ever draft a second baseman? Why would you ever draft a corner outfielder? Because if you can line them up next to a guy who's an athlete, who's a shortstop, or has the ability to catch him, maybe he works out, or who's a center fielder, you would go with that guy. So that's what you do. You try to pick as many middle infield, and when I say middle infield, really shortstops, as many catchers, and as many athletic center fielders as you can, and then you hope they pan out, and if they stay in that position, great. And if they don't, you have another position. And I think people get locked into what the guy was drafted as, and that doesn't matter.
Well, I think with Henry Davis, I mean, he's kind of even come out and said, I think it was last year during the Arizona Fall League, when they asked him about being a right fielder, he kind of cringed. And it's he has that mentality where he kind of wants to prove that he can be a catcher, but maybe if they're talking to him and saying, if you want to get to the major leagues as quickly as possible, you may have to be have that position, flexibility. And that's something that Ben Cherington has preached and talked about ever since he's been here. And I mean, at times it's kind of been, I would say people get kind of annoyed by it, but it's just like, okay, this guy can play infield and he can play outfield and he can play this and he can play that. Like, why don't we pick positions? Well, then it gives you flexibility within your lineup to put the best players on the field, depending on, what the situation is. And if Henry Davis moves to right field, even for a little bit, it doesn't mean that him being a catcher at different points in time is completely out of the realm of possibility. I mean, you could even look at like a Dalton Varsho who, he played some outfield in college, played some outfield in the minors, and he plays a little bit of outfield, a little bit of catcher, a little bit of DH. I mean, Endy, they've been experimenting with him even over the past couple years at second base, first base, outfield, because he's so athletic. I mean, it would be kind of nice that if you can get the best bats into the lineup on a day-to-day basis, and then maybe just have, Jason DeLay sitting back there to catch a couple games and to pinch hit and do whatever, I still wouldn't see that as a bad thing.
Listen, there are other teams that do this. I think that sometimes you get tunnel vision on your own team, and you don't see that this is almost the norm. The Kansas City Royals have a guy by the name of M.J. Melendez. And I'm sorry I said it that way. I'm just trying to get the words out because I drank way too many beers today. But what I'm going to say here makes perfect sense. M.J. Melendez led, I want to say, AAA 2 years ago with home runs. He went nuts. He was just burying them in 2021. So the Royals bring him up in 2022 and he continues to hit a ton of home runs. He's killing it at the plate. But he's not the greatest catcher, and they have Sal Perez sitting there. So M.J. Melendez plays a little bit of outfield, plays a little bit of backup catcher. This year, the idea was to get him behind the plate more. Sal Perez can be moved into the DH spot. He's getting older. I mean, he's a superstar catcher at the end of his career, and this guy is the future. And you know what they found? His stats to this point, and this is up to this point, 221, 302 for his OPS, and 379 for his slugging. That's terrible for a guy that you're expecting to be a mainstay in your lineup. That includes, though, his last 14 days, Craig, where the Royals decided he was done catching for the year. They decided that the preparation to catch and the stuff he has to do as a young rookie to figure out how to frame, how to deal with each individual pitcher, and how to get himself ready for a Major League Baseball game as a catcher was too much for him when he's still trying to figure out how to hit. So what they said was, for the rest of the year, the Royals declared us, for the rest of the year, M.J. Melendez, who's still on their list to be a catcher of the future, he was not going to catch the rest of the year. They declared it to the press. They said, you know what, we've told MJ, you're done for the year. We just want you to get ready and get used to Major League pitching. So MJ Melendez, about 2 weeks ago, was told, you're just going to go out and play the outfield in DH and work on hitting. You know what he's done since then? Over 48 at-bats in 9 games, he's hitting .312 with a .370 OBP and a .500 slugging percentage. Because it's a difficult thing to be a young catcher and come into the majors. The Pirates aren't doing anything wrong by saying, we want his bat, we want him to get used to Major League, hitting, and then at some point, we can still move him back to catcher if we need to. It's not like he forgets how to do it. So, I'm just giving you an example of another player that doesn't even have the pedigree of Henry Davis. And just explaining this is how other franchises do it too. So don't panic over the idea that he might be an outfielder for a while.
Yeah, and I think that people kind of want, and I think I fall into that category at times too, is just you want to solve the problems and you want to say, okay, this guy's going to be in this position for however many years. This guy's going to be in this position for how many years. So you're not trying to, fill different holes at different times. And in the end, I feel like that it'll kind of work itself out. I just don't know if if they're going to actually do this sooner rather than later to try to get the team back on track. And I don't even know if one bat will get the team back on track. I mean, they were just kind of hitting unbelievably, and they got everybody hot at the beginning of the season. Brian Reynolds, Carlos Santana, Andrew McCutchen, and everybody's kind of going back to what their mean would be. I mean, it's not like Carlos Santana was even like a 250 hitter for all of last year. I mean, Andrew McCutchen did hit for some power, but was more below, in that 250, 225 range. So, I mean, yeah, it was nice to get off that hot start, and you want to see it continue. But once again, I'm kind of just like trying to think back to what the goal is. I mean, the goal is to be competitive, to learn how to win, to not lose 100 games, and to build your team for the future without sacrificing the future.
That's the key right there. What you're saying, build your team. The one thing you cannot do at this point is say, I already know who let's just fill in a position. Like, I know who my third baseman is, so we don't need any more third basemen. I know who my center fielder is, so we don't need any more center fielders. I know who my catcher is, so we don't need any more catchers. If you look at the Tampa Bay Rays right now, they have 7 pitchers, 4 of their starting rotation on opening day on the injured list. If you look at the Texas Rangers, another first-place team at this point, they've got something like 10 guys on the IL, including Corey Seager and a couple other big names. Jacob deGrom's on there. You have to also build depth. You have to have players that can step in during a season, because if you suffer a couple of injuries, you don't want to go on a streak where you go 2 for 18 and your season's over. And that's why a 162-game season is so hard on a team. That's why it's so difficult to get to the end and make it into the postseason. What the Pirates have right now is talent for the first time in a long time. The Pirates have a puncher's chance. And yes, they could catch lightning in a bottle and make it to the postseason. And you know what? Root for it. Root for it all year long. It's fun to watch right now. But don't let it crush you. And don't let it be something where you get yourself so wrapped up that you're willing to give away the future, because you have a lot more to do if you want to be a serious contender for an NL pennant or to win a World Series. And that is the ultimate goal. That's what you want to do. So there's still more building to be done. I'm going to tell you something right now. At the trade deadline, it'll be interesting to see what Ben Cherington does. He's going to have players like Rich Hill that are at the end of their career, or a Carlos Santana if he's doing enough. But, I mean, are you really going to be upset if a guy with a 689 OPS at first base, something you can go pick up anywhere? There's going to be 6 guys that can do that in the offseason. Are you going to be upset if somebody says we want Carlos Santana for the last 2 months? No. Grab what you can. So you might sell in certain instances. On the other hand, it wouldn't be wrong to go out and grab somebody. Really good franchises sit there and say it's harder to go out into free agency when everybody has a chance at that pitcher. We should get that guy into our organization, get to know him, and see if we can get him signed. Somebody who's got a year left or only a couple of months left, that we're like, if we can get him in, maybe we can find an inside track to keep him. And worst case, he's here for a couple of months. That's how you build now. That's the next stage. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for trying to win. I'm looking for getting over adversity. I'm looking for guys that are developing. And I'm also looking for how are you building? Because there's still a couple more steps. You're not done yet. This is the beginning, not the end.
If you ever see me out and about in Pittsburgh, you will always recognize me, and not just because of the white beard, but also because of the Y that is always on top of my head, the hat I always wear. The Yins brand, proud partners with Bucs in the Basement. 3 dynasties, 1 brand, Yins. Finally, 1 brand to rep all black and gold. Follow @ShopYins for new merch drops and giveaways. Order online at www.shopyins, the emphasis on the 2 Z's, high quality comfort, lightweight materials, a new modern look for the black and gold, made for Yins, by a Yinzer. Well, my thing, Chris, is that I kind of think back to, I mean, we talk about fantasy baseball constantly. Your team's good, my team's bad.
Your team's
my
terrible.
team is terrible.
You're so bad at this.
I would almost ask you, like, I've been thinking about this all day, and I don't know why, because I mean, you add Pirates at different times. You were talking about how I should add a Jack Sawinski. You added Johan Oviedo. I mean, there's other players.
I got rid of him though. This week. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Pirates fans. Too many losses. I mean, he still is a guy that almost didn't even make the rotation. Like, he wouldn't have done it without an injury. He was off hot, but now he's got to prove something to me. So I kind of gave up on him. Zawinski, though, I mean, look at his age. I mean, he should at least be in your minor leagues in your fantasy team.
So I would think, Chris, I've been thinking about this, is what players from the Pirates, and I know Brian Reynolds is an easy answer, or somebody like that, but if you were looking across, like, the Pirates, who is somebody that you would add to, complete your dynasty? Because, I mean, you basically, you're like the New England Patriots or the New York Yankees or the, whoever it would be of our fantasy baseball organization.
I've won 4 out of the last 6 seasons. That's just so people know.
Who are you looking at? I mean, you name all these names at the beginning of the show, but I would think, I might be taking some notes here. This may be for my own personal gain, but I'm just trying to think of, like, you say you have these pieces, like, if you had to choose between, like, a Rodolfo Castro or a Tucupita Marcano, who are you leaning towards?
Marcano. I don't even have to think about it. Like, I look at Marcano and I sit there and say, okay, fine. He's only got 64 plate appearances and 54 at bats. But I look at a guy who's got a 752 OPS, who's been trending upward, who in the last 7 days, he's only, I mean, he hasn't had a ton of at bats. In 4 games, though, he's hitting 429, with a 1429 OPS. There's something there. I just think that's a guy who's going to develop into an everyday starter for you. Now, I might be nuts. Honest to goodness, I might be absolutely insane. I just think there's a reason why Ben Cherington liked him. Wasn't he in love with him for a while?
He tried to get him twice. And here's the thing: and the Padres, who are a good organization, they, and people see them as a good organization, I should say, had him on the opening day roster a couple years ago, and basically fast tracked him, and he maybe just needed a couple years to cook to get to where his potential lied.
Here's the thing: development isn't linear, and he's only 23. That's the thing. When guys get an opportunity really early and they don't do well, we forget that they could be in college right now. Like, I got out of college at 22. Think about that. I turned 18 in May of my senior year, 2 weeks before I graduated high school, went to the prom as an 18-year-old, and then went off to college for 4 years, actually 4.5. I needed an extra 6 months because I was in the middle of doing radio and wasn't going to class and did a lot of drinking. And I'm going to need another 6 months to finish this off. So 4.5 years. And I walked out the door just a little bit younger than Marcano. And so I think we forget that sometimes. If he's 27, fine, you wrote the book on him. At 23 years old, you didn't write any book on him. About to turn 24 here in a couple of months. There's no book written on him. That's the thing. Like, you talk about guys that develop late. Like, oh, look at this guy, he's 27. There are 2 development arcs in baseball. And if you do any reading on it, it's kind of amazing. Some guys, they develop very quickly, and they have their big bump when they're 22, 23, 24. But the majority of baseball players, 27 to 28 is their peak. And it's hard on organizations because if you've had a guy in there for a couple of years, they're like, well, maybe this is all he is. But some guys don't figure it out. Some guys just have to get to a maturity level. Some guys, it's a mental game. It's not the same as line up. There's 11 guys on each side, and your assignment is to go run out 10 yards and button hook. It's not the same thing. You're up there playing chess every pitch. If you're having a bad week, nobody comes and tells you anything except for, what you got to do is you got to get your head down, you got to get your elbow up, and you got to watch that hitch in your swing, and maybe stick your butt out a little bit. None of that helps you. It's a mental chess game at the plate, and if you get in your head with a bunch of people standing around you, you get in the yips, and all of a sudden you're not making throws the way you used to. It's a very mental game, and I know that I was a different person at 26 than I was at 23. I definitely was a different person at 27. I was having my first kid. And there's some people that wait until they're 30 till they're mature enough to do that. So here's the thing. Don't give up on a guy who's 23, who your GM, who's been very good. I mean, I hate doing this because generally I have a distrust of front offices and I don't believe owners. And I'm basically like, all these people don't know what they're doing and I would be a better GM. Trust me, I have the same reaction that most of you do. But there's been some really good scouting on this team. You can see it in the players they identified in the offseason and that they brought in to get off to that hot start. They knew what they were doing. I have a belief in this kid. I think Marcano could be something.
Yeah, and I just look at the ages of the players. Like, I know that when people are looking for, and they're looking at ages of players, they always throw out like a Juan Soto. You talk about not maybe generational talents, or at least within that class or whatever it would be. You could throw out just a few names of these guys that start hitting at extremely young ages, and that's why they're just well. Jack Sawinski and Rodolfo Castro are 24 years old. Why haven't they peaked like these types of guys? Well, not every player is that type of player. I mean, I looked at Roansy Contreras, 23. Tucupita Marcano, 23. G1 Bay, 23. Luis Ortiz, 24. Jack Sawinski, 24. Rodolfo Castro, 24. I mean, you have Brian Hayes, 26 years old.
Right. And you know what? Here's the thing. He's not hitting really well right now, but he's still above replacement level because of the defense. And that's what growing pains are. And that goes back to something I said a few minutes ago. You're not done building yet. If this team never goes out and finds a star to put in the middle of their lineup, right? They're going to have to go out and pay somebody that comes in that's an all-star. That's a Hall of Fame type caliber player and likely a pitcher as well. They're going to have to spend money at some point, I believe. I know that the blueprint is to be like the Rays, but if you really want to be serious about this, you got to bring a guy in because you can go out and get as much talent as you want, and you can hope they all develop, right? But you need to have a couple of things that fill in the blanks because you could develop the next Mike Trout, but if it's just Mike Trout, then you're never going to make the playoffs like the Angels.
Then you're the Los Angeles Angels.
Right. You can go run out and you can get Tim Anderson, who was like the stud of baseball a couple of years ago, and get Luis Robert in the bidding war coming out of Cuba. But look at the White Sox right now. They're 14-28 because they never filled in with real serious talent. So they're just like the Angels. They're unfinished cakes, basically. The Angels, the White Sox, and plenty of other teams. They're teams that found stars in the draft or the international draft. Or, the Angels grabbing Ohtani, but there's not enough around them. And so you can't go halfway. So that's the thing. There's another stage to this entire thing. And so wait for your guys to develop, but hopefully at some point, the guy up there with the short pockets pulls out a little bit of money and tells Ben Cherington, you can go get this guy. Because you're going to need it in that rotation right now. That rotation is so unfinished. I am more into the 9 guys that are on the 8 guys on the field and the 9th guy that's in the DH spot than the pitching rotation besides Mitch Keller right now. It's Mitch Keller, David Bednar at the end, and a bunch of players that are coming along. There's more to do.
There's a lot more to do, Chris, and hopefully, like you said, I think everybody's waiting for that Andrew McCutchen, that MVP level player to be developed within the system, but if he doesn't come to finish it off, you got to go get it. Else.
You got to go get it, and I don't think it comes. That's the thing. You got to assume it's not coming, Craig. Would you rather just have Andrew McCutchen and make it into the playoffs? Or would you like to have Andrew McCutchen developed within your system and then go out and get Bryce Harper? Would you like to go out and get another guy that's sitting out there that you add on to your team? And that's the difference between winning a division when you're at your peak in a couple of years and winning the World Series. And that really is the end part that we don't know the end of the story yet. The only good news is the first couple of chapters have been pretty good this year.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to hopefully a bounce back in Detroit.
All right. I got worried today because I was drinking too much.
You're good.